thank God for the honor and privilege to do this sacred work. And I thank God that He didn't give up on me and that I answered His call to serve. Gosh, in my 55 young years, I'm in my third career, and it's never too late to switch gears and to follow God. My background, got a bachelor's degree in sociology, social work, and landed in sales and marketing jobs, and got an MBA. Thought I was going to go the business route in my career, and just kind of full of myself in my younger years, and did all kinds of sales and marketing jobs. But there just was something missing in me, and I think it culminated to where I was self-employed for many years and doing pretty well. But then, after 9 knee surgeries over 2 years, being self-employed, and the economy in 2008 to 2010, if you recall, as well as, let's just face it, some bad business decisions, I basically was bringing my family down financially with this whole self-employment gig. Although my husband was my biggest fan, I basically said, something's got to change. So it was a midlife crisis, I guess you can call it. And that was in 2011 when I was 42. And I finally said, God, what's missing? What do you want me to do with my life? And so I had a lunch with a dear friend of mine, Joni, and I thank Joni to this day for her being there, for God using her. We had lunch together, and I was kind of lamenting over my situation. And Joni said, Tiffanie, why don't you go into ministry as a vocation? And I said, what? I said, I'm not worthy of that. Who am I? And notice I didn't say no, but the first thing was, I'm not worthy. And God just works in funny ways and has such a sense of humor that after that lunch, I couldn't sleep well. I couldn't rest. And I got a call from my pastors at the time. I think it was Marie and John Williams at Aldersgate in Slidell. And they had asked me to fill in to give the message because they went to annual conference. And that was like 2 days after I had that lunch. And then I just started to pray about it and think about it. And people say that your life flashes before your eyes sometimes. And literally when I let my guard down and kind of let that marinate in my brain, what Joni suggested to me, I saw all these images throughout my life where God had been speaking to me, and I just didn't see it or hear it. And that to me was very affirming. So how He revealed that. So fast forward, I ended up going to license to preach school in January 2012. And thought I'm going to try this pastoring thing. And my husband gave his blessing, although at that time he was not, let's just say, practicing or identifying with Christianity, even though he was brought up that way. And he said, Tiffanie, I'm right behind you 100%, but don't expect me to be a typical pastor spouse. I'm like, fair enough. So I started that journey. And at the same time, I switched gears in my secular life, that I started a job at a nonprofit agency helping people with disabilities get jobs and keep their jobs. It was like a ministry in the secular world. Loved it. So then I had my first appointment July 2020. And actually, interestingly, it was my first and only church appointment in the conference at First United Methodist in Slidell. And I was brought on as a part-time bivocational pastor there at First Church. And it was a wonderful experience. Being a palliative care hospital chaplain every day is different. There are so many powerful stories and experiences I've had the honor to be a part of during folks' most vulnerable time. But there's several that just are etched on my heart. And the one that comes to mind, that I'll call him Jim. Mr. Jim was found unresponsive on his floor at home. There was no one around. He was very disheveled. Came in, found out that he had cancer, pretty progressive, was in his 60s, but he still had capacity. He could still decide on his own, and he had no family. His parents had passed. He was never married, no children, no friends, no siblings. And his only friend was his neighbor, who was his medical power of attorney, was more of an acquaintance, if anything. And so he was with us for about 4 weeks, and he just struggled. He had the capacity to make the decision if he should get stronger to go have chemo, or if he should just, not have treatment and just let nature take its course, let God take him in his time, and just keep him comfortable. And he vacillated back and forth, back and forth. Bottom line is, finally, the hospital staff, case managers, got him to sign the paperwork to be discharged, to go to rehab to get stronger. And I thought that sounded kind of weird based on where he was talking with me. So I went in and talked with him, and I didn't persuade him, stayed value neutral. And he started to really share some suicidal ideations, some things that were pretty explicit. And I said, well, Mr. Jim, I'm going to have to share this with the medical team, that you're sharing this with me. It's just, for your protection. And he's like, oh, that's fine. I don't mind talking to a shrink. So I passed it along, and they did indeed put a psych consult in, and the psychiatrist did deem him that we needed to, what they call PEC him, that he could be a harm to himself. I'm not sure how in the hospital. He was pretty weak, but they did PEC him, so meant he wasn't discharged, and they moved him to the ICU because that's where at that hospital where we put folks who have PEC. So he ended up dying in the ICU. He never was discharged because, frankly, medically was never ready, in my non-medical opinion. But during that time, we really had an opportunity to talk. And basically, I just listened, and he shared his story. He shared his fears about dying, his thoughts about heaven. He reconnected with his Catholic faith from his childhood, and even his friend brought in his rosary. It was very sacred. And ultimately, at the 11th hour, he decided not to move forward with chemo and to just go naturally. But his biggest fears was he just didn't want to die alone. This poor man was alone for a long time. And I visited him so much because of that. I knew he didn't have those folks, and just helped him kind of process where he was. And more importantly, just to sit with him and hold his hand. And he did pass, and I stayed as long as I needed to, well beyond my hours, holding his hand so he would not die alone. And his friend, the neighbor, had his rosary just with the body in our morgue. I hate to say it that way, but it was. And she called me and said, Tiffanie, I have no need or interest for that rosary, and I think he would want you to have it. So I would like you to have his rosary. And I still have it to this day. So I think about Mr. Jim because, I advocated for him. I got, slapped on the wrist from the hospital for, putting someone in ICU when they were just about to be discharged. But I slept well that night, knowing that I was advocating for him and looking out for his best interests. And another gal's dying of a lung disease, and very coherent, and helped her write birthday cards for her teenager for the next 4 years that she knew she wouldn't be around. And she passed. Another gentleman had an LVAD turned off, a left ventricular assisted device for his heart. We're laughing, telling jokes, and reminding me so much of my father, and hugging people. And they held his hand, said a prayer over him, and they turned the LVAD off, gave him some medicines, and he died. He died right there. We were just laughing and just talking. And so these are just a few that just come to my mind that's just so sacred. I have so many mentors and people to thank in that journey. During my 8 years as the associate pastor at First Church Slidell, I worked with 4 senior pastors and 3 retired interim pastors. And so I thank, at the bottom of my heart, all those who groomed me, and Wybra Price, Carl Klaus, Tim Smith, Tim Newstifter, and the retiree interim pastors of Carol Cotton Wynn and John Wynn, and also William Peebles. They were such a blessing to me during those 8 years. So I continued, and God just kept wooing me in new ways. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna try this Master's of Divinity thing. I'm being called to ordain clergy. So I started in 2016 at iLift School of Theology, not too long ago, to do this MDiv trek. And again, very humbling. And somehow, by the grace of God, for 4 solid years, I was full-time seminary, full-time secular job, and part-time pastor job for 4 straight years. Grace of God. And this graduated in 2020, so not long ago. But things changed a little too. while I was in school, I thought, with the nudging of Tim Newstifter, said, Tiffanie, you could take a unit of CPE, clinical pastoral education, and you probably could get some credit for it. And I said, oh, that's cool. I'm not going to be a chaplain though, but yeah, he said, no, it's a great experience. And so in the summer of 19, I took one unit of clinical pastoral education at Ochsner. It was in 2019 for about 10 weeks. And let me tell you, day 2 of that orientation of being a chaplain intern, I fell in love with hospital chaplaincy. I don't know if it's the full circle coming back from my social work undergrad or what it was. I think mainly it was a one-on-one ministry with people who are hurting and vulnerable, and just being with them, sitting with them was just so sacred, and absolutely loved it. And I reflected back, at one point I wanted to be a hospital social worker. So kind of full circle. So finished that up, still was going to be a pastor in a church, still going that ordained route. Decided to do the residency, they call it, in chaplaincy. And that's like 3 more units of CPE. So as I did that, I got entrenched more into it. And I have another person to thank in that journey is Reverend, now retired, Jeff Connor, by the United Methodist Church. He was a chaplain, staff chaplain at that time, and took me under his wing in the chaplaincy realm. And I certainly give him a lot of thanks for that opportunity. And so I went through that and graduated in 2020. I finished my residency in 2020. And during that year, I had an epiphany that, ordained deacon is probably best for me outside of the church walls. And I reflected back, and I really love the prison ministries I'm involved in, and Celebrate Recovery, and all these things external from the church walls. But don't get me wrong, I love to preach, I love worship, but I thought deacon is a better fit for me, because this chaplaincy thing, this is where I want to see out the rest of my career. So that's kind of when I switched gears at the beginning of my RIM process and did that. And interestingly too, while I was learning to be a chaplain, it was the height of the first wave of COVID. 2019, 2020. And let me tell you, in a 700-bed hospital, learning to be a chaplain and COVID on the front lines was eye-opening. Training on the job for sure. Absolutely loved it. So I stayed with Ochsner after I finished my residency at a small Ochsner hospital in Slidell for 2.5 years. And then I just accepted this position back in New Orleans as the palliative care chaplain. I'm in the palliative medicine departments. It's a specialty, and it's my passion. So that's where I am now today, and I absolutely love it. And yes, there's been so many people that have mentored me throughout my United Methodist journey here, and this ordination journey. I can't even mention them all. I have some dear friends, Michelle Cullison, who will be at my ordination, who's not United Methodist, but a dear, dear Christian friend of mine, has been cheering me on. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention my husband, who grew up Christian, did a little atheist stint for a while, even when I went into ministry. And in 2014, the Lord just spoke to him and blossomed his heart. And he is a man of God and has been so supportive of me through this journey, and couldn't do it without him. And of course, my mother, who, back in the day forced me to go to church and really was my opening to United Methodist, which I've been baptized, confirmed, and married 31 years. So thanks, Mom, for that. And I thank my beloved late father, who passed away 5.5 years ago. I know he'd be so proud of me right now. And my son, Zachary, our son, supports me in this journey. I'm just truly blessed. This past 12 years leading to ordination just helps me to realize that it's not the destination. It really truly is the journey. It sounds cliche, but it's the process, it's the journey, and it continues. And I may have found my true calling midlife and then later in life, in this palliative care chaplaincy thing. But I think that makes it just the more sweeter, because I feel like I'm starting brand new. In my mid 50s, I'm giddy to get up to go to work, and I'm honored. And so I continue that journey professionally, in my profession, and personally in my faith and my relationship with God. And I just know that God just never gives up on us. And I just pray that I continue to keep my eyes and ears open for what he has in store for me next, because I truly am blessed to be a blessing every day with the work that I do. It truly is an honor. And that's kind of my short story of my call to ministry and what brings me here to such a time as this.